This is the Hofstra Radio Alumni Audio Yearbook. Today is July 21st, 2024. Please tell us your name and the years you were at Hofstra Radio.
Hi, my name is Julia Presti. I was at Hofstra Radio from 2018 to 2020.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your stories. If you don't mind, tell us what were some of the shows and programs you worked on at the station?
I was in the sports department. I worked primarily on the locker room every Sunday night. I called Hofstra softball games, volleyball, and a few other different sports. I worked with the Islanders, the Ducks, you name it. I kind of did it all in the sports aspect of it.
Okay. Did you ever work on any of the weekend programs or community affair shows?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you have any titles or positions at the station?
I was the assistant sports director, and then I was the sports director.
Okay. And when you were on the air, did you have any nicknames or on-air personas, or did you just go by your name?
I went by my name.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you again for sharing that. What I'd like to do to start off here is go back to the beginning of your time at Hofstra Radio. And it's a two-part question, and answer however makes sense to you. But what first brought you to the station? And then if you could describe what the radio station looked like, what it smelled like, who was there when you first showed up at WRHU?
So what brought me to RHU was the Islanders. That's the whole reason I picked to go to Hofstra was
Hmm.
John Mullen's appeal of working with the Islanders. Growing up as a Long Islander, I was raised an Islanders fan. So, and I knew I wanted to do sports, and I was between Hofstra and a couple different schools, but nothing had the opportunity that RHU gave me to go in the locker room and to interview players and be right there for some amazing times with the Islanders and some times as the season went on. But it was the most amazing experience I had. And I got to do everything that I came to Hofstra to do. And John Mullen played the biggest part in that. I would say the first time I walked into the station, I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. John Mullen kind of just told me to come in, and him and I chatted. There's a lot of people around, and a lot of people telling me their names at first, and I couldn't remember everybody. But I saw how connected people were and the friendships that were there, and it made me excited to go into the training class and then to become a member. And I was just so happy that some of these people that I met on my first couple of weeks while I was at RHU have become lifelong friends. So it was an amazing experience all the way around.
Wow. I want to take a moment and say, as a lifelong Islander fan myself, I sympathize and empathize. I'm old enough to remember the glory days of the early 1980s, and when we were winning Stanley Cups left and right, and it seemed like it would happen forever. You have not had the same experience. How do you keep being an Islander fan with the disappointments?
Well, I would say that John Mullen's not going to be happy with this answer, or some people at RHU, but I'm still an Islanders fan, but primarily I am not an Islanders fan anymore. I am a Boston Bruins fan, but I still root for the Islanders. But ever since 2010, when they went on their cup run into 2011, I have been a Bruins fan through and through. But again, when they play each other, I'll root for the Bruins. But everything else, when I'm watching with my dad or my brothers, I'll root for the Islanders. Still live on Long Island. I'll go to Islanders games all the time. My fiance makes fun of me for it. That I'm rooting for two different teams, but I couldn't stop rooting for the fans, the players that I grew up watching.
Wow. I thought we were going to be friends. There's a little tension here all of a sudden. No, I'm just
So then
kidding.
so I shouldn't tell you who I'm a baseball fan of then either.
Oh boy. Is it you're a Red Sox fan as well?
Yes, that's how I became a Bruins fan. I've been a Red Sox fan since 2004. Um, so I've been with them in the highest of highs, but I've been there when they've had absolutely horrible seasons. So yeah, it just kind of my love for the Boston teams kind of dragged into hockey.
Wow.
But it was still working for the Islanders. I tell everybody about it, and I'm so thankful for that. I mean, even I got to interview Johnny Boychuk, and it was weird. I'm like, oh, I used to root for you as a Bruin, and now I'm interviewing you as a player, and so it was funny.
Wow. Wow. Okay. All right. 2004. That cuts right to the heart here. That was I remember being up 3-0, but well, let's not litigate that. That's okay. We
20
can we
years this year.
yeah. Oh. Mm. All right. Well, I'll put all that aside. So you mentioned John Mullen several times. Did you talk to John about coming to the station before you applied to Hofstra when you were still in high school? Were you aware of WRHU before you came to the university?
So when I went to Hofstra, I kind of did it as a tour, just as like a safety school. I never wanted to stay home. I wanted to go away. Quinnipiac was the school I wanted to go to. But when I'd say my parents kind of made me do the tour just to see, I instantly fell in love with hearing who are now former students of RHU talk about everything they did and the experience of working with Hofstra athletes and then working with the Ducks and going and working with the Islanders. All of a sudden, my attention kind of switched, and I was like, wow, actually, this school that I grew up 10 miles from is not just the school down the road. It's something that could really help me in my career. And I I don't remember if I talked to John before coming to college, but I remember in the first couple of weeks of being in school, talking to him, and just he loved that I was very interested in sports, and he was very much uh, pushing for females to be really involved in the sports department. When I first started, there wasn't a lot of females in the sports department. There was a handful. And so he loved that. And we had a connection talking about hockey and sports. And it just, again, it kind of felt like a home. And I was so excited. And then I got into the training class in the spring of 2018. And I kind of lived out every dream that John told me I could do. And Bruce and other people that were there that they told me I could do. I didn't, when you first hear that as a young college student, you don't think that you can actually do all of this. And I got to do everything that I came to Hofstra, everything I heard when I was in high school that John and the other students said was possible was truly possible. And that was my favorite thing about Hofstra was, it's a smaller school, but it gives you that aspect and that ability to do everything that you set your mind out to do.
Hmm. I'm wondering for you, was it a love of sports that led you to broadcasting, or did you love broadcasting and radio, and in combination with sports, did that lead you there?
It was 100% sports. I remember when I was in elementary school, I was talking with my gym teacher, who also happened to be a Red Sox fan, about sports. And he kind of made the suggestion. He goes, "You should be a sports broadcaster when you grow up." And I was 10 or whatever, and I kind of dismissed it at that time. I was like, oh, what's that? I didn't know anything about it. But the more that I fell in love with all different sports and played sports my entire life, it kind of was like, wow, I can have a passion with a career and bring it all together. And that's kind of what led me into it was several people saying to me, hey, let's like look into this career. This would be great for you. And Hofstra gave me everything because it was hockey, but I could also talk about softball and volleyball. I played those sports growing up. So for me to call Hofstra softball games and to work with them closely with a lot of those athletes was incredible. And the connections I made with Hofstra softball players and volleyball players and some of the coaches, it was right in my element because I played that my whole life. So I got to do everything, and it was a lot of fun.
Wow. Wow. Do you remember the name of that teacher?
Yes, Coach Barton.
Coach Barton. Well, thanks, Coach Barton. It's amazing. Now I teach high school social studies, and I've been at it long enough now. I have former students coming back and saying, "I remember when you said this thing," or "I remember this," and it's amazing how a suggestion or a comment can focus a student or change their trajectory. So I'm glad you remember the coach's name and that it was meaningful in your life. That's amazing.
Absolutely. I think that there's that saying that teachers impact students' lives, and it doesn't have to just be academically, but in this sense, he impacted the rest of my career. And it's crazy to think that it was just one time sitting in his office talking about sports and rattling off stats about the latest, Red Sox game or whatever we were talking about. It just kind of turned into, wow, let me look into this for my career. And it's just amazing. And I am so thankful for it because I could never say that I was in a locker room talking to Islanders or commentating on this game or that and being on the airwaves. I never thought that was possible. And it was just something as a talking with somebody as a elementary school student turned into what I love doing now.
Hmm. Hmm. If you'll allow me, looking at 60 plus years of Hofstra Radio, I've talked to a lot of different people about their experiences. And even when I was there in the 1990s, there were women who were interested in sports broadcasting, but felt intimidated or didn't feel it was their place or time. So there's two things I'm thinking about, just in the grand trajectory of the time there's been a Hofstra Radio. Is one, the ability for young women to pursue sports, and what a resource Hofstra Radio has become. And second, again, before your time, the university wasn't necessarily as supportive of the radio station as it has become in more recent years. And the fact that you had an opportunity, which to you just seemed to be sort of perfunctory. Oh, I'll go through this because my parents are saying so. You went on a tour and they had students there to talk about what a resource the radio station was. And I just find it, so amazing and so gratifying that the community of Hofstra Radio has been on this journey, and what it has meant for people like yourself to have opportunities that not that long ago just didn't exist. I think it's pretty great, and I'm so glad to hear your story.
Yeah, there's plenty of times that John Mullen or Bruce or any of them would tell you to come back on the weekends and to talk to the high school students that are coming through. And,
Hmm.
sometimes I was like, oh, I don't want to wake up that early to do it. But then I remembered I was that high school student that somebody there impacted me to choose Hofstra. So I would say nine out of 10 times I was like, yes, John, I'll do it. And you kind of mentioned that sometimes it could be intimidating of being a woman in sports. And yes, I think that in, 10, 15 years ago was definitely the status quo or the feeling that some women had. But all over now, you're seeing more and more women in sports. And when I walked into the office, there's a couple women in the sports department. And then when I left, there was a lot more.
Hmm.
And it was amazing to see the growth of it from, let's say there was a handful of maybe 10 women in the sports department to when I graduated, there was a lot more. And I'm sure now that there's still a lot more in there is incredible to see of how everything has changed. And even just in general within broadcasting to see the roles that women have in broadcasting, because now I'm in news, it's just so amazing to see the growth of the industry over time from when I first started looking, when this was mentioned to me 15 years ago to where I am now is a testament to what the radio station did and to what the college did and finally putting in that effort to make that radio station. And I think all the Marconis that were won definitely put the radio station on the map. And those students, I wish I remember their names from those years ago when I went in high school, but they definitely made such an impact and ultimately made me choose to go to Hofstra instead of going away.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know in some recent conversations that I've had for this project, your name has come up both on and off the air as someone who's important and influencing. So again, just seeing that passing of the baton and that support from generation to generation is just fantastic. But I want to get back to your beginning. So you get this tour and you decide I'm going to go to Hofstra, and you go and I guess you fill out a form and you do an interview, and then there's the training class. What do you remember about that?
I remember the training class just being at night and right before we went in, I was talking with Madison Wright, who was the personnel director at the time, and she's like, "Oh, I have a treat for you for the first night of the training class." And I'm like, "Ah, what do you mean?" And then we all go into like John's office and take our photo, and then they put our photo up on a board so everyone knows that these are the trainees. But I definitely remember making friends with people in the class and going through everything with them, and taking that big test on at the end and your practice or your practical, whatever they call it, and your hands on the board. Um, so that was definitely fun. It was sometimes long because I had class all day to then go and do that. But it turned out to be amazing. And my first day, or I don't know if it was my first day, but my first couple of days, I wound up meeting up with Lyanne Souza, who is one of my best friends now, and we got talking. She was wearing a Yankees jersey. We were working on the Long Island Ducks game. She was the engineer, the only female there, because we just needed one engineer at the time. And we got talking about Yankees and Red Sox, and she became a mentor to me and wound up becoming the first female sports director.
Mm-hmm.
And then I followed in her footsteps to become the second female sports director. Um, that that's how it all started. It went from, this kid in the training class who has to do everything to Lyanne. I would say, I think it was the first Ducks game that I worked, teaching me the ropes. And we weren't even in Studio North or Studio South. We were um, in another smaller studio because they were renovating the studios, and the name's escaping my head right now. But I remember we were in the small little studio doing everything together, and she was teaching me the ropes. And then the first time that I engineered a game by myself, because it was over the summer, so I was a commuter, so most people went home. I was, texting her, "Am I doing this right?" and all of that, and she guided me through and mentored me through everything at the station, and like I said, has become a lifelong friend. But it was just a whirlwind of, you're doing all this, you're learning this stuff in the training class, and then next thing you know, they're trusting you to put a Ducks game on air. And
Mm.
it's like, hopefully you don't mess it up. And that's what I was nervous of. But, you're definitely taught a lot by different people along the ways, but she was definitely one of the first that left a huge mark in me.
Wow. So, how important was it for you and your confidence to have that time over the summer when there are fewer students available and doing those games and filling in those shifts? How important was that for you?
So I would say I wouldn't have been assistant sports director or sports director without that, because so many kids went home or they would stay for a week or two, this or that. So it was really on the commuters, and I kind of built my summer life and working part time on the side and everything around the radio station. I truly found my passion. I felt that sometimes when I was going through the training camp, I'm like, do I really want to do TV more? Is this radio what I want to do? And then sitting there doing the Ducks games and doing the other shows or working on the locker room before I was the assistant sports director, it paved the way so quickly for me to be able to move up. I kind of thought that like Nick Faria and some of them were just, saying like, oh yeah, this will help you move up quicker. But it really did, because they got to know who you were and they got to trust you. And it was very quickly that they were like, here, do a Ducks game, do this game, engineer this. And then I was slowly going on air through the locker room or the various shows during the week, and it built my confidence. I mean, I remember the first time I was on air, I was so scared to do it, and it's like stumbling across every word. And then Nick was like, okay, that was not good. He's like, but you'll
Mm.
get better with it. And I truly did. And then he trusted me a couple of weeks after my first Long Island Ducks game to go on air for the NHL draft. And we had a couple of people at when the Islanders played at the Coliseum, and I was in the studio kind of giving live updates on the draft and how it was happening. And I remember like being nervous, and Nick and I believe Kenny Conrad was there, was like, you got this. Just you'll get through it. And I stumbled every now and then, but I think kind of holding my feet to the fire, if you want to say, and making me do it, it was the best thing, because I got those jitters out and I really cemented my place in the radio station and proving to kind of I think I was the only girl in the room, proving to all the guys like I can talk hockey, I can do this. And then that's where the trust came to letting me be a part of Islander broadcasts in the fall, and then eventually going on site and being a reporter to being a lead reporter for the Islanders. And then Jordan Stupler and I were supposed to go to the NHL draft, and then
Hmm.
up in Montreal, and then COVID happened. But in 2 short years of being in the radio station, how quickly my career there progressed because of the summer and nobody really being there, is how I was able to move up so quickly and be trusted to do as many games as I called.
Wow. That's great stuff. And I love that you mentioned your first time on the air. I often ask people, do you remember your first time getting behind the mic and doing that? And a lot of people say, no, I don't remember exactly. I remember the feeling. But it seems like you remember the exact first time you were live on the air. Is that right?
Yeah, I knew everybody was listening. Like I stupidly told everybody that I was going on air, and then I kind of felt the pressure of like my friends and family listening in and tuning in to 88.7 to kind of listen to what I was going to say. And all of a sudden I was confident going, and then they're like, all right, you're live. And like I felt like it was the end of the world. I started like sweating, and I was
Uh-huh.
struggling getting through the 2 minute update. I think it was a Ducks game was my first time on air for like an update of what was happening in the league then. So I don't remember what was exactly my first time, like what I was saying, but I remember being scared and being nervous and sounding probably incoherent. And I know I very quickly got rid of that recording, so I never listened to it, and it never made its way back on air.
Hmm.
Um, but it was from where I ended to where I was when I started is night and day. And I think the radio station just kind of brought out a different personality in me. I was definitely very shy growing up, and you can't be shy when you go on air. And it kind of made me to be more outgoing and being able to talk. Like if you would have had me do this interview when I first started at the college radio station, I would be like just as nervous as I was the first time I went on air. And now I'm sitting here confident, and it's all because of RHU and everything that I did.
Wow. And it sounds like that even though you weren't thrilled with your first time on the air, there were people there who were supportive and pushed you forward in the right direction and gave you good feedback. And it seems like you did the same as you moved up through the ranks. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And I would say when I was mentoring people as I moved up, I was the first one to admit, hey, my first time was horrible. But to remind everyone, you're in college. You don't need to be, you know, the best of the best. You are still in college. You're learning. This is the whole reason for it, and learn from your mistakes. And I think that being pretty bad as I was for my first time gave me that ability to connect with other people who were just as nervous when they were doing their first update in the middle of a sports game or whatever that they were doing. Um, so it gave you that human part of it. Like, oh, I'm not just a sports director. Like, hey, I was in your shoes one time. Like, it sucked for me. Like, you're
Hmm.
going to get better. And so definitely I was thankful for Lyanne, Nick, and all the people who were there for my first time that, pushed me to go back on air and to get better every time I went on air.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if I went through all the interviews I've done, I'd say there's probably less than 10 people who are like, yeah, I did really well my first time on the air. I think almost all of us struggled through that for one reason or another, or got rid of those tapes. But it's good that you kept on and you kept those lessons. Was there a moment, like a light bulb moment, where you thought, okay, I've got this, I'm really good? You alluded to this a little bit. Or was it a light bulb moment of like, okay, I'm good at this? Or was it a gradual process of, I can do this, I can get better with more and more reps?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think once I was talking about something that I was confident in, I was very like, this is a light bulb, I can do this. And I think that kind of came with calling Hasha softball. But I would say that I remember Nick one night, somebody called in sick. They were supposed to do a Hasha volleyball game. And Nick goes, can you do this? Can you do play by play? Like I had never done color. The only thing I'd done was the updates and like the wake up in the morning, like kind of updates and the Ducks game updates and that kind of stuff. He's like, I need you to do play by play for this volleyball game. Can you do it? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. And I remember staying up to really late at night, figuring out how to make charts and what stats I needed to include and um, trying to call a volleyball game. I was, oh my god, I can't do this. But then by the third set, I finally got comfortable. Like, okay, like calm down, I can do this. And as I did more and more volleyball games and was on the air more, once I went into softball season, I was like, okay, I'm very confident about this. And I called the game with softball. I mean, I would say I still had improvements to make, but I was finally like, okay, I'm at a good place. I've now taken the past 5 months and learned from it, and it made me better. So again, I would say a little bit of both. Light bulb moment at that softball game was, yeah, I can do this, and I'm doing the right thing for my career. But it definitely took bumps along the way of sitting and listening to my voice and be like, okay, that sounded horrible with that call in volleyball. Let's do this next time. And I'm sure most people hate the sound of their voice. I know I do. So it was very cringy listening to some of my calls on volleyball or, you know, figuring out how to do that. But to make it that when I went into softball season, I was like, I know the sport like the back of my hand because I played it my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I know this team. I can do this. And I walked in with that confidence and I was able to call those games.
Yeah, that was my next question to follow up and say, how much did you rely on sort of the, I guess, muscle memory of playing softball? And I think you said you played volleyball. How much did you rely on your experience to help you get through the broadcasting aspect of it?
Definitely a lot, I would say. And then sometimes I'd have to remember, okay, not everyone played, so I can't use certain terminology. So I'm like, okay, let me bring it back and not dumb it down, but basically make it that other people kind of understand and remember that you're on radio, you're not on TV. So you have to walk everybody through what's happening. And in softball, it's definitely easier to have that slower momentum. In volleyball, in 30 seconds, the ball can be touched 50 times. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, trying to learn, okay, yes, I know what's happening, but I don't need to say everything that's happening and to bring it all because there's plenty of times I'd be like, okay, this person sets it to the outside and all this happens. I'm like, but I need to know their names too. So then it became more muscle memory of memorizing every person on Hofstra volleyball or Hofstra softball so I could come to the point of I don't need to look at my charts. I don't need to look at my charts for the other team, but still memorize who their best players were and repetitively listen to how to say their last names if they had it on their team website. So I would say the muscle memory that I learned through sports of you have to remember so many things kind of came into broadcasting, but the muscle memory and talking about sports because of playing also played a huge factor. It's a little bit of both, but I'd say I definitely struggled more with volleyball just because of some of the last names were I'm not the best at pronouncing people's last names, and that was probably one of my downfalls in broadcasting. So it's definitely hard sometimes with other teams that didn't have the feature that Go Hofstra had, where like Go Hofstra would say how to pronounce a last name of a player.
Mm.
Some of these schools didn't have that, so it was finding how to make everything flow together and not to a point that people didn't understand. Like it had to be somebody who's never watched volleyball before can listen to my voice and know this is what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So as you're figuring these things out, there must have been people who were giving you advice, and you've mentioned Lyanne and John and Bruce. Who else was helpful in getting you to a point where you felt comfortable and confident in what you were doing?
I mean, I would always say Lyanne was my biggest supporter in everything. I again wouldn't have been assistant sports director. I wouldn't have been on air as much if it wasn't for Lyanne. But another female in the sports department I turned to was Victoria Conway because she wound up mentoring me to become assistant sports director. And then her and I had because she played softball too. We had the ability to do a softball game right before she graduated. Um, I definitely say like those two were the biggest impact. Nick Faria helped, Kenny Conway, Conrad, a lot of them of that same uh, age were all ones that were very influential. But I would say if I could look back as to the two that definitely impacted me the most was Lyanne and Victoria Conway because Lyanne was just brutally honest with me and like she's like, okay, yeah, that was not good. Like you need to fix that, but it was in a good way, like in a productive and supportive way. Like she knew I could do it, and she would tune in to every game I called, whether it was on 88.7 or Go Hofstra. If she was driving in the car or hanging out with her boyfriend, she tried to take some of that time. I would definitely say as the time went on, I relied on other people who were in the station after me, like Jordan Stupler, Sage Kamasi, and some of them were definitely ones that like we went back and forth with things. Um, but leading up to becoming assistant sports director, it was Vic and Lyanne.
Okay. Um, would it be fair to say that you felt comfortable socially at the station pretty quickly? It seems like you got there and you found your niche and you found your people, or did it take some time to get comfortable with the group?
I would say when I first started, I was shy. So I kind of knew Lyanne, and kind of just when we had those monthly department meetings, I kind of just hung out with her and talked to the people she was talking to at the time. And then over the summer, you made those connections with the commuters and those who chose to stay. So I kind of found my group within the first couple of weeks, months, and then all of a sudden everyone came back from summer vacation. So now I was trying to like figure out the vibe of everything, and but it was very quickly. I mean, we definitely had sports department parties and stuff that I went to. Um, that made you closer with a good group of people, and I was very close. Like every class, when I was done with class, I was at the radio station hanging out with various different people, whether it was news people, sports people, and just getting involved in talking and making friends. It was, going out to lunch with this person, or after the locker room. A lot of times we went out for dinner, or late night snacks and stuff. Um, so it was a little hard when I first started, because it was basically the summer. It was right, the semester had sort of ended, so a lot of people went home or graduated. Um, and then it wasn't until you met more of the commuters and did some of those events, or like when John told me to come and work on um, some of those tours, that's when you got to make, put a face with the name, and start to talk to people that way.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you for sharing that, and it's what a remarkable journey you've had, and I like to ask this question to reflect back on what we've talked about. I think you've kind of already answered this, but I like to give people a chance to sort of ruminate on it and distill it in their own terms. So, when you first showed up at Hofstra Radio, when you decided to come to Hofstra University and join the radio station, at that point, what did you hope the radio station would mean, and over time, what did it become?
So when I first started, I hoped that it meant that it would find me a job and a passion for what I was doing or hoping to do with college. But I got way more out of that. I got lifelong friends. I mean, I just got engaged a couple months ago, and people from RHU were there with me to celebrate. Like, these are friends that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. People that I talk to weekly or sometimes daily, that I got way more than I ever intended. I wouldn't be where I am in my career. Granted, it's not radio and it's not sports, but if it wasn't for what I learned at RHU. So I kind of, went in it like not expecting a lot besides kind of working with the Islanders and getting comfortable on air. But it just taught me a lot about myself and the industry and everything. And John Mullen and Lyanne and a lot of the people I mentioned played such a big role in that. And the best part is that I have lifelong friends. Everyone kind of said that when you went to RHU, you're going to have these friends forever. But I mean, I still talk to Jordan, to Sage, to Lyanne, to Kyle, to uh, John Mullins' niece, Nicolette. I wound up mentoring her. Her and I are very close. We talk all the time. Like, some of these people have just helped me in my career when, I was unemployed for a couple of months. They were the ones that were the biggest supporters, or helping me with stuff, or let's say reading off over a resume. They have become that network in the industry, and we all have such vastly different jobs in the industry that it's just like, wow, look at this that I have, and I wouldn't be, very happy with the job that I have now, or anything, without this support system. And then, honestly, through everything, I mean, I was not in when Andrew Cohen was in, but he was one of the alumni that I happened to get very close with over time. And he connected me with somebody else who was one of the first females in the sports department, Shannon Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
That was her maiden name. And her and I have gotten close. We talk like once a month. And she was very helpful when I was unemployed for a couple months, and then I got my job, and that journey that I went through. And just talking with her over time and connecting about everything. It's just like this network that is there you never expected. And I'm so thankful for the network and the friends and where I am today because of it. And it changed me as a person in terms of making me more outgoing and less shy, and being able to advocate for myself. Because I think that's like the biggest thing of RHU is there's 200 people in the station. Everyone wants to have their time of getting on air, so you have to advocate for why you deserve to be on air, and prove why you deserve to keep having these opportunities. So it just taught me a lot in so many different ways, And again, I never thought I was going to be the assistant sports director, let alone the sports director, or working for Lyanne as the first female sports director. So it was so amazing, the journey that I've had.
Hmm. I'm so glad you mentioned Shannon as well, because at various points during our conversation, I thought of when I spoke to her a while back about her time at the station and figuring out how she fit in socially and getting those reps and being a former athlete and how that translated. So, again, over the generations, over time, these things are passed down, and it's wonderful to see that you're in touch with her and Andrew Cohen, who's just he's Mr. WRHU.
Yes.
He's everywhere, and he's such a great advocate for people. So
Hmm.
I'm thrilled to hear that that has been passed down, and what a journey you've had, despite your negligible sports alliances. I think we can agree it's been a pretty great journey for you, and I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And to anybody that's listening to this, I mean, I remember when I was sports director and COVID happened, I tried to connect so many of the sports people with the alumni at the time, and we had different like Zoom meetings, and I've heard of people who are either applied to jobs or made these connections with these alumni and had them help out, whether it's like Mike Leslie or Jared Greenberg or from the big names to anybody who were involved in the radio station. And it's like the alumni network of this station is so extensive and so willing to give back. And I think that's also like one of the biggest reasons that every time John asked me to do something, I was like, yeah, these people helped me in my career. And another reason I wanted to come on here and talk with you is the alumni and to pass that torch down the line of the future generations of RHU. I mean, look how long it's been around. I was there for the 60th year banquet, and now it just keeps going and going and going. And I just can't wait to see what RHU becomes in 5, 10, 15 years.
Wow. This has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I have a bunch more questions, and maybe we can have another conversation sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on.